Hi, good morning. Today is Tuesday, the 18th. This is a regular meeting of the Darien Board of Education Policy Subcommittee meeting. This morning on the agenda, we have three proposed rules that have been brought forth by the administration in consultation with our outside counsel. Marge?
Okay. So the gift policy was sent back from the board to consider the limits that we had put on, that we had recommended. In discussion with Dr. Adley, we stand by the proposals that we made. Shipman and Goodwin does not have a model policy, so this is not necessary. Our current policy would need to be either revised or repealed because it doesn't reflect the current practice.
Got it. Sarah, do you have comments?
No, go
okay.
ahead, start.
So I thought you were going to go.
No, I mean, I agree that we need to have a policy. I think, can you remind us what the board conversation was and what we need to, what's problems we need to
I
solve?
think it was around the limits, right? We felt.
Right, do we need limits? I did, as you saw in the memo, I did check with Mrs. Klein. She feels whatever the rule is, there should be one rule for everyone.
Right.
Because the question was whether special education teachers and service providers should be treated differently. She felt no.
Right, okay.
So I think, and if I remember correctly, there was also the conversation that it should be, like the class gift should be, a certain amount per student in that class, right? So, what does the policy say for the limit? Sorry. let me go to
So the proposal is $15 for holiday gift and 25 for
Right, so it's a
end of
total
year,
of 40.
which
right.
I think reflects the current CDSP practice.
Yeah, it is exactly. And every several years, they had all the PTOs get together and they discuss whether it's still appropriate or whether they need to raise it. And then all 5 elementary schools have to be in agreement before they'll change the amount.
So I guess the question is, because CDSP does change it on a quasi-regular basis, if we quantify a number in policy and then CDSP feels there should be change, then we have to come back to this table to do, like, how do we solve that problem?
I'm not so sure that it's a CD, I'm not so sure that it's a CDSP problem or what they give or what they don't give. Other than the gift policy, I guess, right? I guess if it's coming through the gift policy, I guess it would be nice if they were in line with that.
Right.
Yes, that's probably. Because technically it's a gift, yeah.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it's all voluntary. Nothing's required by any parent ever. I thought that was sent back because a couple of board members were worried that by putting any amount on, we were limiting people that might want to give more. But this advice from CDSP is more about the group gift, because often classes want to give a gift together for the whole class. And then on top of that, some parents do give additional gifts. And so this is here to sort of guide them, I thought, but also people don't necessarily follow this individually. Sometimes parents are just going to give what they want to give. So I don't want to be, I think having this limit on the idea of a class-wide organized gift giving is practical and helpful.
There are some other districts who put a higher limit for individual gifts. Like New Canaan, for example, has $50 for no staff is allowed to accept a gift in excess of $50. Group gifts can be $25 per family, whatever. So, without a limit, there are stories about families who feel pressured in competitions. And is that how you're measuring the worth of a teacher? By who gives the biggest present.
So you just said, I'm sorry, in New Canaan, that the policy is that teachers can accept a bigger gift?
Cannot accept a gift larger than $50 unless it's a group
Okay.
gift, and then they have the guidance that we have.
But our policy isn't prescribed for the teacher, or is it the idea is they can't accept it, but they do, or how does that work for
So
us?
it would depend, we're looking for guidance on how you want us to draft it. Right now, it just says that to present a gift shall not be elaborate, unduly expensive, or cash. So that's the burden on the family. Actually, Dr. Adley picked up that it says the student, it should probably be the parent or the family.
Right.
says that, so. So it can go in a variety of ways. If you, if you put it on a teacher, then potentially it's, a term of employment.
Yeah, I'm a little wary of putting it on the teacher, just
Yeah.
because I think that puts the teacher in
Yeah,
an
it
awkward
does, it
position.
So I mean, I've always had the opinion, I kind of don't care. I don't think there should be a limit, as long as it's disclosed, and whether that's, a teacher's gift or gift to the schools. And we have a lot of generous parents. We appreciate their support. I do understand this idea that having competition among parents, we don't really want to create that. But, if somebody has the wherewithal that they want to do something extremely generous, I don't know why I would preclude that. I think in terms of these numbers, like 25, 50, like it's going to be really hard to monitor this sort of thing. I have no idea how we keep track of that now. So I don't know if we just pick a number that's a little higher, give it a little more room, say $100 and move on, and just keep it, not exorbitant, but, something where we're not going to be having footfalls with small dollar amounts.
Yeah, I would say some guideline would probably be helpful, and the oversight of it at the moment is not that tight, right?
Right.
So I think putting some guideline in would be helpful, so it doesn't go all over the place. But the actual administration of this doesn't really come through the board per se,
Right.
right? So it's loose in that regard too. There's the honor system of understanding that this is what it is essentially. But so therefore, given some guidelines, I think
Right.
keep some barriers around it.
I'm fine with, I mean. I just wary of putting a specific number on it because it will change, so,
It will, agreed.
I don't know how you do that.
And we could just put language around saying not egregious or not excessive or something along and see how it goes. I mean, I don't think this has been a big problem in the past, has it?
No, but student activity accounts, these types of funds, can be problematic. And so we're just trying to give some guidance around it.
Would prefer to leave it as is, to be honest, because I still feel like there's room for individual parents to give individual gifts, and this is sort of, a recommended way of doing when they do the group gifts. Because an individual parent is not gonna go look at our policy, but the PTO will.
So if we're gonna leave it the way it is, we should remove the word cash, because I think we know people give cash. And then the last paragraph, which talks about gifts to the school, that's covered by our gift policy.
Yes. Okay, so strike the third paragraph and take out
Cash.
cash and then change student to family.
Yep.
That's fine.
Works for me.
Great.
Okay. So it seems we have consensus around that.
Yep. We'll bring it to the board.
Please.
Thank you.
All right. Number 2.
Okay,
Marge.
Title IX, let me just clarify that this is a moving target. And so what you have here are the policy for Title IX for both students and personnel that's on the website is the final rule of 2024. So the final rule of 2024 was held invalid by the district court in Kentucky and affirmed by the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights in January of this year, that it was not effective for any state. So Shipman and Goodwin's website is getting updated in bits and pieces, but the proposed Title IX policy for students and personnel represents the 2020 guidance, which is now in effect. So it wasn't, I mean, there is, Dr. Adley and I have a little cheat sheet because it's so hard to understand the difference, but it goes back to a much narrower definition of sexual harassment. Sexual discrimination is the same. Obviously, any sexual violence is the same, but it's a narrower definition of sexual harassment, and it provides a much more complicated system of investigations. It's a bifurcated procedure, so you have to have a different investigator and a different decision maker, which is actually another unfunded mandate because districts have hired investigators because of the complicated nature of the process. The only additional guidance that I got from Jessica last night is because of the difference between Connecticut state law and Title IX. She suggests that we remove the reference to Title IX, which we already did. She didn't think we had already done it, but it's so Connecticut covers things that are not covered by Title IX, and we're still subject to Connecticut law. But that's already been done for the most part, but we'll go through with Jessica and make sure that all references to Title IX don't conflict with Connecticut law.
So I guess my question would be, you mentioned this is a moving target. I'm not sure everything in here is even accurate today with some executive actions and some other things that are going on. So I'm not sure we should really be moving forward with this at this time until we kind of get.
So advice from Shipman and Goodwin is that we're still subject to Connecticut law, and the things in here that don't align to the executive order over which there's still some concern about whether it's enforceable, that we're still subject to Connecticut law, and that's why those provisions are here.
Yeah, I don't want to get into a battle over, whose law we're following or which we're following. We're doing federal, we're doing state. Are we in a situation where we're doing one but not the other? And I appreciate that. There's, different levels, but I think this, to your point, is a moving target. Maybe we best table this for a little while and see how it shakes out.
So the problem is that when someone accuses somebody of sexual harassment, we are required to follow the procedures here, not the procedures on the website. So we have to do something because those procedures are no longer in effect.
Then we need very strict clarity as to which pieces we're applying and which ones we're not. And I don't see
I
any kind of
mean,
guidance.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
Please.
step on
Oh,
you.
go for it.
If we are getting our money from the state and we're following state law, I don't understand why we wouldn't just do what the state has clarified that we're supposed to do for now. And then if things change, come back to the table, change them again.
The major differences are obviously in the definitions of
Right.
who is a protected class. And that is Connecticut law is broader than federal law, but the procedures as far as investigations we're required to follow.
So my view is that we need to follow what our council is telling us to do, so.
I would agree with that.
And administering this administratively, we would have to follow state law. So
Well, and even that part of the federal law that covers the procedure, we're required, we can't do it the old way, which we were all very happy with the old way, but that's not.
Yeah, this seems very complicated.
Yeah, I mean, there's a federal preeminence question here, which I don't think this subcommittee is ready to answer if our council doesn't really know, and we don't really know, and we don't know what the state of the regulation is. And I hear that the state has some rules, but we also do have federal rules, which would be, take precedence over the state rules. So this is really probably something we're best to just leave under the old rules. And if somebody wants to do something from the state, they can let us know.
So what I may have misspoke about the moving target. They want to tweak some other provisions of this with things like adding the ability to hire an independent investigator, which districts are doing anyway. I understand what you're saying. I mean, Shipman and Goodwin does not advise this, but if the board would like to make some motions to revise the parts of the policy that don't affect the procedure, they're welcome to do that. We would not then be in compliance with state law.
So it sounds like there's not a lot of agreement on this one.
Well, right now there's
Two.
2 versus 1
Right.
agreement. And I mean, I am a believer and we pay people a lot of money as a board to advise us on what legally is required of us to do. And they're saying, we need to do this.
And I appreciate that, but I bet they don't.
I mean,
I
the
bet
state of
they're-
Connecticut has specifically addressed
Right,
some of
but
the
there's-
things that I think that you're concerned with.
But there's federal issues that would take precedence over that. And so I'm sure even if we got counsel in here, which I think is probably a good next step for the whole board, when we see this, I would suggest that at least. They're going to tell us like it's kind of unclear. It's hard for them to tell, but so
Are
I
they gonna
think this is probably a
Say
broader
that,
discussion with the
or,
board
sorry,
with council.
So since Marge talks to them, is that what they're gonna say?
They're going to say that the only provisions that they are uncertain about are the provisions that include under the definition of sexual harassment, sexual identity and sexual.
Correct. So then we're going to adopt a standard that the state has promulgated that may be in conflict with the federal. So we're going to put ourselves in kind of a quandary there. So I don't think that's a great place to
But
be.
the state of Connecticut has said that we
Right,
need to
but the
follow
federal
the state
government-
laws.
Yes, but the federal government takes priority over the state law. So we're now going to put ourselves in the middle of a potential conflict, which I don't see why we would go into that willingly when we don't have to do
But if
anything.
the state,
today.
if the
So we
federal
do-
law, if the state, sorry, I was just gonna say, if the state changes its guidance, we can change our guidance. And to me, doing what the state tells us right now also has the added benefit of letting all of our students know that we feel that they all deserve to feel safe and secure.
So the problem with doing nothing is that we're required to follow the procedure that's in the regulations for the investigation. That's why, even though they don't suggest this, I said, well, what happens in this instance? And they said the board could introduce a motion to remove the language that they find conflicts with federal law.
So it sounds like we should probably kick this back to the full board for discussion, and then we should definitely need to hear more from Shipman and Goodwin when that we have that conversation.
John will say.
That's fine. That's fine. We want to send it up to the board. My question is, I appreciate the memo. It's hard for me though to track what exactly is belongs where.
Right.
So it'd be helpful to me maybe see in some sort of grid. Here's this language, here's who's in agreement and who's not, here's what's outstanding. So that we could really understand as a board from a really structured way, what is truly up for debate. I think to the point everyone's making, there are where we're all in agreement on something and there's no conflict. That's fine, but it would be helpful for the board to understand where there's actual conflict so we can understand what's at risk or not at risk.
It would be a simple grid because the only thing that conflicts right now with federal law is Connecticut's definition of what's a protected class. And that, because Connecticut includes gender identity and gender expression, and the federal government has, by executive order, said that that is not included. So everything else, we're required, federal and state law agree on the procedure. They don't, where they diverge is on the definition of protected class. But that grid is easy enough to me.
So we agreement to kick it back to the full board?
Yeah, I mean, I
Sarah?
think we have to approve this.
Right.
But I think your question is whether or not you want to include gender identity or not, and I absolutely do, but we are a board of 9, so.
Right, and it would be helpful to have Shipman and Goodman here, I think.
I mean, we could also have them write a memo. I mean, it's a very simple,
Let's start with the
Right.
memo.
it's
Yeah.
a very simple memo. They honestly, at this point, they don't know what the consequence would be of not including that language. But here's the deal. It's a small part of the policy and we're required to follow the rest of it. So when we have a sexual harassment complaint, when we give a policy to the family so that they can track what we're doing, it really needs to be the part that has been.
So then we don't
approved by
need
the-
Shipman and Goodman. We need to decide whether the 9 of us want to protect all students or leave some students out of the sexual harassment
Well,
categories.
We'll get an opinion of what the consequence would be of not, of following Connecticut law when federal law is not necessarily in alignment. And I understand what you're saying about the supremacy clause, but that's the only part.
Okay.
of the
Right,
policy.
and yeah, and I don't understand the encouragement to adopt quickly that Shipman gave if this is in state of flux. So I'm
Well,
just
because
curious
the-
to what
because
that
we're
is from them.
Because as of January 9th, the policy on our website is no longer effective. And we have sadly continued to have sexual harassment claims. That's the reason.
Joanna, you just said something about protecting students. I just wanted to clarify. Of course, the policy is meant to protect all students. It's just identifying which are protected classes. But it just sounded like we weren't protecting all students. And I think the goal is always to protect all students.
Right, but if someone has been sexual harassed for their gender identity and we don't have that listed here, then they will have no recourse under this policy.
In terms of the protected class. Understood. The way the language used, I just wanted it to be clear that also, we of course start with all students.
Okay, so it's going to
No
come to the
follow-up.
board. Is that like,
Yeah, I think that's where we are. Policy number 3, Marge.
Can I just clarify how quickly you want this to go to the board? Like, are you talking about Tuesday
Tuesday?
evening?
Yeah.
Which is fine if that's,
Fine.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I think it would be dependent on Shipman's comment. Or did we ask for a memo? Yeah, so
They'll
let's,
be, they'll do it. Okay, so the discrimination policy has been updated as well. The Title IX used to require that all appeal processes in our policies for non-discrimination for 504 had to be uniform. Title IX then decided that they didn't need to be uniform, but as a best practice, Shipman and Goodwin felt for ease of the administration and for parents that the appeals processes should be uniform. So the discrimination policy has been revised to relax the timelines a little bit, to allow parents who are appealing a decision a little more time to submit paperwork. And then after they submit paperwork, then the superintendent or designee has 30 days to render a decision. That's a little bit looser, not a lot, but a little bit. And then the other part that has been updated is that Connecticut state law, again, prohibits epithets on the basis of sexual identity or gender expression. And so that has been included to comply with state law. So I assume that maybe we want a memo on that too.
seems like it's the same issue, so maybe they can cut and paste. Does that work for you, Julie?
Yep.
Okay, Sarah?
Yep.
Okay, so it sounds like we're going to move ahead, but we'd like more information from Shipman, please. And that's all I see on the agenda for today. We have any public comment?
We have nobody online or in the audience. Should I still say it?
No.
No. All right, and that's going to conclude our meeting today on March 18th of the Darien Policy